Good morning. Would members of the Planning and Growth Management Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum? Good morning. Would members of the Planning and Growth Management Committee please report to Committee Room 1 for quorum?
So we can call the meeting to order now. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes. Councillor Campbell? So moved. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We can go through the items on the agenda and see which ones we wish to hold. The Echo Roof Incentive Program application for 6 Security Avenue. Moved by Councillor Perks. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The Echo Roof Incentive Program application for 50 Drummond Street. Moved by Councillor Campbell. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The Toronto Green Standard Tier 2 for Capital Projects Report. Recommendation to adopt the staff recommendation. Moved by Councillor Barlow, because she's here. Thank you. Welcome to the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 18.4, the Live Streaming Committee of Adjustment Meetings update. There's a brief staff report. I'm going to hold it for a minute. Maybe we'll just get some additional comments from staff as to where they're at on that. Item number 18.5, technical amendments to bylaw 569-2013. There is a speaker on that. Item PG 18.6, Unilever Precinct Planning Study. We have a presentation and speakers. City Planning Time Tracking System. 18.7. Are there any questions or comments on that? Everyone's okay with that report? Yeah, you're allowed to hold it. No problem. That's why I'm asking just before I rush through. Hold by Councillor Barlow. 18.8, the Toronto Employment Survey. Do you want to move it or do you want a presentation? It's moved by Councillor Campbell. To adopt the recommendations in the staff report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I have an additional item for some reports that I would just like to circulate for your consideration, so I will move that we add it to the agenda. That's okay with my colleagues. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now we can go back to the items that are in front of us. The first item that's in front of us is the technical amendments to bylaw 569.
So that item can only be taken place at 10 a.m.
Which has to be held till 10. So we have left Unilever Precinct. And I know that Councillor Fletcher would like to be here for that. But we can start with the staff presentation on it. They're going to give us an update as to where it's at and give us an overview as to the Unilever site. So can we start with that?
Sorry, Councillor Schreiner, I was looking at other stuff while you were talking. Number 4 on the agenda. What did you do to it?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kyle Kneck. I'm the manager of community planning in the Toronto and East York District for the East Section. Carly Bowman is here with me. She's the senior planner working with, leading the file for the Unilever precinct and development applications. We wanted to give you a short presentation this morning in order to put the applications that are before you this morning into the context of all the planning work that's going on for the site and in the vicinity of the site. If you look at the context map, the site is a large site located right outside the periphery of the downtown core, at the mouth of the Don River, close to the Gardiner Expressway and the Portlands, where the waterfront revitalization process is underway, and in the south of Eastern Employment Lands. It's a large site. It's significant in terms of its size, and the proposal is significant in terms of the scale of development and the amount of infrastructure required to unlock the development potential of the lands. So we wanted to present to you to put this application in that context. We've collected a few photos of the site and to the site here, which illustrates the industrial heritage of the site, the natural heritage nearby, and the confluence of significant transportation infrastructure that surrounds the site. And I'd note the irony that although the site is very close in proximity to major transportation infrastructure, such as the Metrolinx rail corridor, the Don Valley Expressway, and the Gardiner Expressway, that the site is actually very difficult to access. The recommendations for the report are dealing largely with community consultation and initiating an EA process for flood protection north of the rail corridor. The impetus of the report is a preliminary report on the rezoning application that's been brought forward to the city. But that sort of belies the significance of the planning work that's going on in the area. And so really what the report does, and which will Carly take you through in more detail, is to put the proposal in the context of the entire city and the city's urban structure, the city's employment lands, and its downtown office and economic market, to review the development proposal itself, to put that development proposal in the context of the master planning that's happening for the site and for the adjacent lands, and to understand how the development proposal and the master planning needs to be coordinated with all the major infrastructure investment that's currently being planned and coordinated in the areas immediately surrounding the site. And with that, I'm going to ask Carly to take you through some of the important details associated with the development proposal and the precinct planning process.
Thank you, Kyle. The first thing I'd like to speak to is ownership of the precinct. So the total land area is just over 60 acres, or just more than 24 hectares, with First Gulf being the primary landowner in the precinct. They own on the map in front of you parcels A, which is the former factory site, as well as parcel C, the Senior Space Film Studio site. The city, through itself as well as the Toronto Portlands Company, owns parcels B and D. So B is the city works yard, the Booth Works Yard. B is the Keating Rail Yard, and D is the City Works Yard. What this means is, taken together, the majority of the precinct south of the Metrolinx rail embankment is concentrated in two owners. 90% is owned by First Gulf and the city. First Gulf owns about 55%, and the city, together with TPLC, owns about 35%. First Gulf's applications were first submitted in 2015, a conceptual official plan amendment for approximately 1.2 million square meters of employment development, a new employment node adjacent to a new transit hub. And the breakdown of the proposal was for approximately 1 million square meters of office uses and approximately 200,000 square meters of retail, recreation, entertainment, and service commercial type uses. We now have before us, and the preliminary report deals with, rezoning and subdivision application for the lands within First Gulf's ownership. So on the small map on your screen, that's the hatched area. These applications deal with about 830,000 square meters of the proposed total precinct, again an employment node with approximately 690,000 square meters of office and 140,000 square meters of retail, recreation, entertainment, and service commercial uses. The vision advanced through the rezoning and subdivision applications remains the same as the vision that was initially advanced through the conceptual official plan amendment. I just want to walk very quickly through the policy framework As Kyle mentioned, the proposal is entirely within employment lands. It's part of the south of eastern employment area. And along the western and southerly edges, there is a park frontage. As well, in the north edge, along the Metrolinx rail corridor, there are utility corridors. As well, the site is entirely within the Lower Don Special Policy Area. Through the city's recently completed municipal comprehensive review exercise, enabled through OPA 231 and Site and Area Specific Policy 426, dealing specifically with the lands First Gulf owns, the site has been retained in its entirety as employment. The Site and Area Specific includes an expanded list of employment-related uses. It directs that development be comprehensively planned, and it has a series of other requirements. I should note that the Site and Area Specific is not in force at this time, as OPA 231 has continued appeals. The site is subject to generally industrial zoning, partially through the former city bylaw, partially through the new city bylaw. The subdivision application deals exclusively with the lands First Gulf owns, and it creates streets and blocks as well as a flood mitigation landform edge along the western component of the site. In terms of application review, where we are presently is staff and agencies have been circulated the rezoning and subdivision applications, and they will provide comments back. As is always the case, application review and revision is an iterative process, and so that is now what we are within. As well, the city's public consultation process will commence following direction from the committee. The consultation will be on First Gulf's applications, the city's planning study, as well as the East Harbour Smart Track Station. And these are to proceed in a linked, integral fashion. As well, First Gulf has independently conducted pre-consultations with the community and a group of stakeholders. The last thing I'd like to speak quickly about is the analysis of these applications of the planning study has strong linkages to what we call enabling infrastructure. The first piece is respecting flood protection. As recognized through the official plan special policy area, the precinct is in lands that are prone to flooding. So all of the yellow that you can see is within the spill zone. Flood mitigation needs to be addressed in order for development to proceed. And so with completion of the Portland's flood protection project, the area south of the rail corridor within the precinct will be removed from flood risk. However, when the Donmouth EA, which is implemented through Portland's flood protection project, it preceded the advancement of roadway and transit infrastructure that is now contemplated. So north of the rail embankment remains prone to flood risk, and that is the reason that this report also advances a recommendation for a new environmental assessment north of the rail embankment. The East Harbour Smart Track Station. So planning for East Harbour Smart Track Station on the Stouffville Lakeshore Go line is advancing in tandem with and integrated with application review and the planning study. Its construction is required for the development as proposed to proceed. The station will be a hub connecting Smart Track, the future Broadview streetcar extension, which you can see running diagonally through the proposal, and the future Relief Line station to the north. On the Relief Line, the July 2016 council decision approved the preferred alignment for the Relief Line subway, including a station at Eastern and Broadview. Linkages between the Relief Line station and the East Harbour Smart Track station are an integral component of our precinct planning exercise, and the proposed Broadview and Eastern EA also enables the Relief Line station construction as proposed. Gardner East. So the spring 2016 council decision approved the hybrid 3 alignment for Gardner East as well as the Lakeshore reconstruction. As this committee well knows, the Gardner realign is shown in red, the reconstructed Lakeshore is shown in blue. So the EA report is now formally before the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and obviously the Gardner is linked to First Gulf's proposal in terms of its locational proximity. The last project I'd like to speak to is the Don River and Central Waterfront project. This is a major stormwater infrastructure project that will capture, store, and transport stormwater and combine sewer outflows for treatment at the Ashbridges Bay Treatment Plant Complex. While it's very extensive in its geography, the first phase is the Coxwell Bypass, as well as 2 storm shafts that will be within the southwest quadrant of the precinct within the Keating Raillands. That concludes staff's presentation.
Are there questions? Councillor Campbell. Oh, we can, well, would you like to do DEPS first? Sure. We'll ask you to step aside. We'll do deputations, and then we'll come back for questions. Pardon me? So we just have at the moment Mr. Jarofsky. And then after I have Sarah Kerr from the Toronto Film Board. Mr. Jarofsky, you have an interest in this? You know we give you 5 minutes, and then if we have questions, we'll ask that of you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, members of Council and staff. And my name is David Jarofsky. I'm the CEO of First Gulf Corporation. And it's an honor to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about the project we call East Harbour, the former Unilever site. You may know about our company as a condo developer, but in fact, we're also a major commercial developer in the GTA. In fact, one of the largest, if not the largest, private commercial office industrial developers in the GTA. To name a couple of recent projects, we recently just completed the new Globe and Mail Centre, which is a 500,000 square foot LEED Gold office building on the site of a parking lot which used to be part of the Toronto Sun on King Street East. That building is now open and it's 100% leased. There will be, when everybody finishes moving in, about 4,000 people working on King Street East in that building. We also developed recently the new Canadian Coca-Cola headquarters just at the other end of the site. We adaptively reused that building, and Coca-Cola now has moved their head office there as well. So we do a lot of office. I want to talk about the context of this project. It's an employment office project. The three words that I use to describe it are jobs, economic development, and public transit. And that's at the heart of what we're doing. It's about the future competitiveness of Toronto. It's about the growth of Toronto. How are we going to compete in North America with other major cities and employment centers? Where are those working people going to reside? And how can we take advantage of existing infrastructure and intensification of the downtown, subway lines, GO Transit, existing roads, existing services, to intensify and provide a future place for employment and our economic competitiveness in downtown Toronto. Over the next 25 years, it's estimated that there will be more than 100 million square feet of office employment space needed in the GTA. Now, that sounds like a fantastic number, but it really isn't, because if you look at the last few years, 3 or 4 million feet per year of development is really what we're doing already. So over 25 years, 100 million is probably low, given the growth of our population and the attractiveness of our city. So the question is, where is that going to go? Those spaces simply do not exist in the downtown core or in the city of Toronto. And more than half of the employers surveyed want to be in downtown Toronto. And this includes employers who've recently moved to downtown who are non-traditional office employers in the downtown area. They include Coca-Cola, Apple, Amazon, Google, Cisco, and many others. And I can tell you, we're on the cutting edge of this stuff. They want to grow. They love Toronto. They want a place that they know that they can house their employees, where the employees can live, they can work, and they have access to good public transit. And that's what East Harbour is all about. It will be a mixed commercial district. I don't think I need to reiterate too much of what was already said by staff, but I do want to say that we've had a terrific and wonderful collaborative relationship working with staff at all levels, an unprecedented amount of collaboration and cooperation, and I want to really compliment planning staff and staff generally for really doing a great job in working with us. We don't always agree. There's a lot of back and forth, but I believe we have a good working relationship, and for that, I do want to mention that, and I do want to thank staff. We're focused on providing a new precinct that promotes workplace wellness and provides amenities for the surrounding community. Probably the most important amenity is the transit hub. The transit hub at East Harbor will serve to the north, Leslieville, Riverdale, and all of those communities on the east side of the Don River. It will, of course, serve the East Harbor, but it will serve the entire Portlands area, which is really the last place for development in the downtown over the next 25 years. There is nothing else like it. It represents 700 acres of potential future development, and the transit hub will serve those people. And also, it will serve the West Don lands and the Distillery District and all of the east side of downtown, because the transit hub is meant to also be a connection across the river. It will be a biking connection, it'll be a pedestrian connection, and it will be a transit connection for everybody on the east side of downtown, on that side of the river. The transit will include streetcar up Broadview, LRT along Queens Quay, a new station for the Relief Line subway. It will include GO Regional electrified transit, and of course it will include Smart Track. So it will really encompass every type of public transit that's available in the City of Toronto, and it will have a huge capacity to allow for growth of this node for employees and for the surrounding residential community.
So I've got to get you to sum up. David?
In summing up, I really just want to say our project has benefited from a positive collaborative relationship with city staff. We look forward to continuing to work with them. We're listening to them, and I think that a lot of the comments that we're getting are improving this development. And so we're in that phase right now, and we will work with other public agencies and through the public consultation process over the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions of the deputant? Councillor Campbell.
Thanks for the comments, the presentation. What do you foresee as some of the obstacles that might have to be overcome?
Well, it's a pretty simple project, really. What do we have to do? We've got the Gardner, we've got the transit hub, we've got the mouth of the Don, we've got some other infrastructure related to water and sewer. So it really shouldn't be a problem at all. 3 levels of government, a few agencies.
Is the flood aspect, the flooding aspect, one of the most critical things that needs to be addressed?
Well, interesting. We bought this site, and all of these infrastructure projects were already well underway for years. I mean, many of the EAs were completed. The mouth of the Don, the flood was completed. Transit improvements, the Gardner work had been well underway at that point. So we see the project as supportive of those infrastructure projects, and probably giving an added impetus to see those projects go forward sooner, because now we've added a return on the investment through economic development and jobs. So I think it gives it an added push. So the one that we are waiting for and hoping for announcements very soon is the naturalization of the mouth of the Don. We will also contribute on our site to that flood protection. So there will be private money going into that project as well as we develop our site. So that one probably remains the biggest challenge, but we have reason to be optimistic that we're going to hear something rather soon.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Should have asked you first, Councillor, being a non-member.
Good morning.
Councillor Fletcher.
Just to go over some of those challenges, actually, building it will be the easy part. Getting all the infrastructure together is the challenge. When you're talking about the transit, I recognize in here that, and in the report, it's very clear about the new Smart Track station, the Relief Line being close by, and as well the Broadview extension as being prerequisites for being able to develop that out. The Broadview extension, is that part of your thinking here in adding that into the precinct or through your own lands?
Yes, it is, Councillor. The Broadview extension is something that the city has wanted to see for many years. Of course, when there was an operating factory on the site, that wasn't a possibility. We are very much on side with that. I think that we and staff are in agreement about where it should go and that it should come through the site and connect right down to the port lands and provide that added connectivity to the surrounding community. So it is an important part of the project.
And the mix is an 80-20 mix, employment versus, we'll call it supporting retail or cultural or recreation. I see you supporting or thinking about quite a wide variety of things to go on in that 20%. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So we can't have an office precinct with tens of thousands of employees and not give them a place to eat, for food, for entertainment, for fast food, for nicer restaurants, for film, for whatever it is that, I mean, these are people, some of which will live very close by and others who will come from far distance. So it's critical to the success that we are able to provide amenities and options for those working people, but as well for the surrounding community. I don't think anybody wants to create an office ghetto. We don't want King and Bay, 5 o'clock at night, it's dead. Weekends, it's dead. We don't want that. We want to create a place that's a 7-day place that you'll want to ride your bike, take the streetcar, the subway, come down, go out for dinner, go to a market, see a performance, a cultural event, do some shopping, whatever it may be. And so to really create a complete community, we feel that is an important aspect. And in fact, we won't be able to attract the employment unless we do have those sorts of amenities.
And lastly, just on you are putting in an official plan amendment, or you already have that in. This is a zoning application for the lands that you own, which are about 35 acres of the site.
That's right.
And then the rest of the site is made up of owned by the city, owned by Enbridge, and a number of small parcels. So that would be master planned. You've already started master planning, but really what this will do is it will bring the city in as starting not afresh, but at least now doing the master planning for this entire Unilever precinct.
That's right, and I think that First Gulf and staff have looked at this as a precinct in its entirety that should have a plan that applies to the entire precinct. But of course, we have more than 35 acres of land and a transit hub, and we have a lot to do, over the next few years. So it'll keep us busy for a while. But we do think, and I think staff agrees, that we should plan the entirety of the precinct so it's a unified plan. One other thing I just do want to mention, we plan to build an extension of the path, and we very much want to make this an extension of the existing path. Now you might say, well, that sounds kind of funny because you're 2 kilometers from Union Station, so that's a long way to walk. But the actual way that we see it working is that every structure within this precinct should be connected in a newer, better version of a planned path, just as we have in the core. This one will be planned, not as ad hoc. This will be a planned path, such that people on a cold winter's day can, go down, access the transit hub without going outside. They can hop on a subway or a train to Union Station in every 2 or 3 minutes. They can go to their meeting or have lunch or whatever they want to do at, TD Centre, First Canadian Place, and then come back. And it really actually extends the downtown core with that transit shuttle going back and forth. So we really become not a second downtown, but in fact an extension of the existing downtown. That's our approach. And when we talk to potential employers about that, it's a very exciting concept for them, because many of them might say, well, I want to have an office, near City Hall, but I'd also like to have, other people in another location on the east side. So it really enables us to make that connection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? So just, David, you had brought up with, oh, sorry, Councillor Perks.
So I'm sure you've been doing your due diligence around marketing this. What is the prospect of being able to fill up all that office space?
Well, it's interesting, we do get the question, and it's a good question, because 11 million feet, that's a lot of office space. So I'll give you just a couple of data points. I think that the real challenge is if we don't do it, how is this city going to accommodate its growth in the downtown for office? So here's a couple of data points for you to consider. 5 or 6 years ago, we bought the Toronto Sun site, which was primarily industrial with a bit of office. Today, there's 1 million square feet of office on that site that's 100% leased. Across the street from the Toronto Sun site, we're coming to council with a rezoning application for another 500,000 feet of office that we hope to break ground on within the next 12 months. So, we're really voting with our own investment dollars. We really are seeing the demand. So that's one example. Here's another example. South of Union 10, 15 years ago was nothing, zero. And frankly, I didn't see the opportunity. I wish I did, because I would have loved to have been doing that development. But others who are smarter did, and today there's 6 or 7 million square feet of development down there that's transit enabled and connected. And that really happened in a very short time. I mean, most of us can remember when there was nothing down there. So it's not if we build it, they will come. It's really, if you just look at the demand, 3 or 4 or 5 million feet a year of office demand in the GTA, where does most of it want to go? Most of it wants to go downtown. The sites simply don't exist today. I mean, today, we're trying to build over railway tracks and on top of things, and it's all really great, but, you'll do a few buildings like that, but where are the, in 2020, in 2030, where is the city going to grow? Well, the last frontier is the east side and the Portlands, and this development will really serve as a gateway to the Portlands to bring public transit and employment to that area.
Thank you. Last question for you as well, David. You had a question when you were in to see me about the timing of the EA that has to take place. And my understanding is if we adopt this report, staff will begin in June and should complete it in 18 to 24 months. And I understand that's satisfactory and works within your timetables as well?
Yes, that does. And that EA for the north side of the tracks around that BMW dealership, that is a critical piece of this, as Carly mentioned. Yes, that works for us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. No other questions of the deputant? Thank you very much for coming. I'm sure we're going to see you a little bit over the next few years.
I think so. Thanks.
The other deputant we have is Sarah. You wanted to speak to us? Come on up. Get your 5 minutes as well.
I probably won't need all 5. My name is Sarah Crow-Harnell, and I'm here in my capacity as a member of the City of Toronto's Film, Television, and Digital Media Board. I want only to make mention to this committee that while the Unilever campus is an exciting piece for residents, and I'm one in that community, we will be losing 120,000 square feet of studio stage capacity as they are relocating, obviously. You can't build with that development, and the master planning means that they'll be relocating. So I simply want to do a placehold for you to remind you that as a key industry for the city, that there are multiple investors and developers looking to build studio space in the Portlands. I just want to let you know that we are another competing interest in the Portlands development as a result of this. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputant? Thank you very much for coming. So then, we have questions of staff, which we can go back to if there are. Non-members, any questions of staff? Councillor Fletcher?
Yes, I just want to be clear on who's leading the precinct planning. The city, is that correct? Why my mic is so live.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's being led by the city, the precinct planning. And the report you have before you is for the city-owned lands as well as the lands that Mr. Dorofsky spoke to with respect to First Gulf.
And do you have a companion process that looks at the services that exist there, the 14 acres of city services? such as all of the solid waste collection, all of the parks vehicles, parks operations for the south end, for Toronto and East York, operate from the booth yards. So how far along are you on your relocation plans for those quite critical city industries that are housed in this precinct?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, we've been working on the relocation study for some time now. Came out of the yard study, but this development prompted us to look a couple of years back at a relocation plan. So Real Estate Services leading that study, and we're looking at candidate sites in the Portlands, essentially, to replace the portion of the booth yard that would have to be relocated. The historic buildings would stay, but the outdoor storage and some of the yard facilities would have to move to another location.
Can we get an idea of exactly what the functions are from the booth yards, the number of departments that are there? I think MLS is there, solid waste is there, parks is there,
Transportation's there as well.
transportation services.
Yep, Parks and
I
Forestry.
do have a motion to look at relocation for those services, but it would be helpful even if, going into council, we had a clear understanding of what the number of services that are on those 14 acres, and so we would understand.
Mr. Chair, we can easily provide a briefing note
Could you
circulated
please?
around. It's readily available.
That'd be very much appreciated. I didn't realize, I forgot transportation was there, so I know they're all there. And so the number of relocations based on the precinct planning and understanding that it is, I think the challenge is all the infrastructure development that needs to take place, but we're looking at the relocation of the city services, and also, as we've heard from the deputant, to be looking at the relocation of an important critical film studio into another area in close by. Do you think we can actually accommodate the relocations of, that would be close to 20 acres by the time we're finished?
So, Mr. Chair, the short answer is yes. We have a variety of options. Things don't have to happen right away. You can anticipate that this relocation could take place in phases, and there is adequate options for us to make that relocation possible.
So you're not worried that there's not a place to go in order to service the south of the city? Because this
No,
is
I'm not.
kind of,
I am not worried.
this is where it's all at now, and just as Mr. Jarofsky said, it's,
Well, I can put a greater emphasis on it. You have a project that's coming forward, the precinct plan, for a significant commercial opportunity for the city, as Mr. Jarofsky. It would be ill-advised of us as staff not to recommend to you to look at the potential on the city lands at the Booth Yard in conjunction with that. So we've done that, and we will find adequate and suitable facilities. That's not that that's the least of our worries in a very complicated geography.
and I don't know if anybody's here from economic development. I hope so, because this is a very large economic development project. Who is here from economic development this morning? Nobody.
Through the chair, this, of course, is consistent with the direction of economic development in supporting the expansion of employment uses. Economic development is fully abreast of the proposal and supportive of the work that we're doing today.
It actually isn't about that, Madam Chief Planner. It's got to do with the film industry, so I expect economic development to be here when we're talking about the film industry and the importance of making sure that that cluster remains intact in the south end of the city. So I'm well aware of the importance of employment lands, having championed this area for all of my career, which you might not know. So that is my interest in actually making sure that that's being taken into account, and I would wonder if there's some way to ensure that economic development is on this precinct team from that point of view of those relocations.
Well, absolutely. They're on the team and are fully engaged with their work to make sure that the film industry is promoted and protected through this exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of staff? Councillor Campbell.
It's in regard to the action that the city took to set aside $400 million for the flood protection, and then we're going to ask the provincial government, the federal government to, for matching amounts. Can you talk a little bit about how that's proceeding?
So, Mr. Chair, that ask is with the federal government currently. The City Council's indicated a priority for flood protection. We're hopeful, optimistic that we'll have a proper signal from the federal government that this provides the revitalization we've long sought.
So it also mentions the province of Ontario,
Correct?
and how are things going with them?
Well,
Are
the
they committed to this?
federal program requires the province to come to the table with their dollars as well, so this will prompt that discussion and hopefully compel everybody to come forward with the necessary program.
So given that there's a provincial government election in the next, 14 months, can we anticipate that those discussions are happening soon so that the money can be nailed down?
So I'm not going to
It might.
I'm not going to speculate on the politics.
but
I'll leave that to you, but I would say that the discussions at the staff level, city, province, federal government, all understand the importance of this project. There's a lot of other issues around the federal program and things that are required to make that a success from the provincial point of view. We're in active dialogue, and there's no lack of communication between the
Okay.
levels of government.
Would you expect that we would know about the certainty of the funding by, halfway through this year?
We expect that you're going to get a signal through the federal announcement on the next round of Canada infrastructure program that would require then the province to firm up its commitment. That usually would take a couple months, 3 months.
Okay.
So sometime by the summer, I think we would probably have an answer.
Okay, good, thank you. And I guess just the last question is in regard to the consultations that are planned. I mean, the typical thing that we do, I see that there is a motion coming from Councillor Shiner on behalf of Councillor Fletcher to broaden it. I wouldn't anticipate that there would be a lot of opposition to this, but I'm just wondering what its satisfactory radius would be and if this is deemed to be satisfactory. So basically, it says residents with 120 meters, and then additional residents, institution, and owners determined in consultation with the ward councillor. So I just don't know if it should the radius be, much broader, or is it necessary? I'd just like a comment from staff on that.
Through the chair, it's not atypical to expand the boundaries in the way that it's been proposed here. It's an important question that you've raised, given the critical role that this site is going to play in the vitality of the economy of the entire city moving forward. So it's something we can give further consideration to.
Okay, that's good enough. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Jennifer, on the last question, given further consideration too, does that mean make some further recommendations when this goes to council?
Through you, I can go back to the team and we can have a conversation about how we consult on a citywide basis with respect to this proposal, because I think it's an important point that there will be citywide interest in what is being proposed here, and having some kind of a mechanism for citywide input is important, whether that's a survey or whether it's ensuring that we advertise the meeting just more broadly through the media. I think that's something we can go away as a team and give consideration to.
Right, so my question then, this report will be coming to council. It has a 120-meter notice in it. Will you be providing that advice to us at council with further recommendations when this comes there to our next meeting?
We can absolutely do so.
I don't need a motion for that?
No, we'll do that and we'll bring forward. Would you like it to come forward in a report form, or?
Probably would be best just a report that the councillor can append and adopt when she sees it for the consultation period.
Great, we'll do so.
And if you have anything councillor wants to add to that or any consultation area, please take that into consideration as well, because she's working with her residents. I had a question on the presentation. There was a map here, the ownership map. There's no page number on it, but it's all the different sites. And there's a property L that says it's owned by Metropolitan Toronto. Doesn't exist anymore in Metropolitan Toronto. So what is the difference to that little piece to the strip that's B that happens to be owned by the City of Toronto?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a bit of an unusual list of owners that can be the city and its various subsidiaries. My understanding is that the parcel at L is a telecommunications tower.
Oh, so there's a lease on that parcel.
I wish.
So when you review this, will you be looking at the length of the lease for that communications tower to see if it's appropriate for it to continue where it is on the former Metropolitan Toronto lands?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will seek advice from our colleagues in real estate services on that matter. I also see my friends frantically digging around over to confirm that analysis. So through you, Mr. Chair, we will undertake further assessment on
I'm just looking as you go forward to make sure that you provide the terms of the lease that's there back to the planning department for its review, and then consideration whether this will then be the appropriate spot for that communications tower to be in the future, because all leases have an end. And it may not be the right spot to leave it there, and I don't think we would want to have our a sister department extend the lease without being sure it was the right spot to have that location.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the advice. We will speak with real estate services.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Oh. Councillor Perks. Councillor Fletcher, did you have more questions? Because we had you for questions and came into committee, but if you do, let me know, and I'll ask the indulgence of the committee to go back out for the non-member of the committee to ask further questions. All in favor, opposed, carried. Councillor Fletcher, and then I'll go to Councillor Perks.
Just looking at the map that you've drawn our attention to, Mr. Chair, the ownership map, which I think we would all agree is fairly complicated, including some number of companies. The item B is owned by Toronto Portlands under TEDCO, but it is actually, it's all railway tracks. And is one of the other challenges here how and I don't know if you've thought of it yet, but the sewage treatment plant receives all of its chlorine along that line, maybe once or twice a week. So how will that be factored into all of this thinking? As this is, I guess we'd almost call that another city service that we need to be looking at.
Correct, and you're quite right that there is an existing track that provides chlorine services to the Ashbridges Bay plant. So through TPLC and through the planning department and with Unilever, we'll be talking about access and ways of integrating that parcel, the former Keating Yard, but there's one line still there, into the proposal. So that's an ongoing discussion that we will bring back to the appropriate committee.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, you had questions.
Thank you. I just want to pursue a little bit something that Councillor Fletcher was investigating in her first line of questioning. All the various city functions and the film functions that are there. In the briefing note that you're imagining bringing to council, is it going to give us kind of a critical path? This moves at this time. I'm just very concerned about losing capacity for some of those key city services. And I've seen us up against the wall in the West End with some of our yards on occasion.
Through the chair, it was not our intention to be bringing that forward in the note to City Council.
Okay.
That note specifically will speak to how we can employ engagement on a broader level across the city.
Okay, I've got two things mixed up.
At this point in time, there really isn't a concern around those. We own those lands. We are in no ways being pushed out of those lands. We're not, the uses on those lands are not being compromised through this planning process. So, our position would be that there isn't an urgency with respect to this coming forward to council in terms of addressing that.
Okay, but at some point.
Councillor Perks, maybe the deputy city manager can respond to you based on the motion that Councillor Fletcher asked me to move on her behalf.
So the motion that's apparently going to be presented will ask us to come back to the appropriate standing committee to update the committee on our active investigations on consolidating yard functions, including lands at Booth and Eastern Avenue.
And you should have a copy of that
Okay,
motion.
so that's specifically to that purpose. Okay, very good, that helps. And just on the issue of notice, and I just, for maybe to help Councillor Campbell, because he found the wording here unusual, this is the standard wording we use when we have a complex application in Toronto East York, the 120 meters.
Oh, right now we're questions of staff.
I'm asking the chief planner, is that the case?
Through the chair, that's correct. This is standard wording that we use to expand the boundary.
Thank you.
Thank you for making it a question. Are there any other questions of staff? Councillor Valo.
So you're going to start the community consultation for the precinct plan and the smart track station at the same time? You'll be doing it in the same meeting?
Through the chair, that's correct. Our intention is for consultation on the Unilever Precinct plan, the East Harbour Smart Track Station, and where appropriate, First Gulf's applications, that those consultation processes proceed in tandem.
Okay. And when you talk about a transportation hub, are you talking about a one station? So all these, because all these projects, different transportation projects are at different stages. So how are you planning for this hub?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at this as I have some insight on some of the things that are going on. We're going to have to bundle some of the projects together. Metrolinx wants to expand its bridge across the Don River, but to accommodate the RER program, the Smart Track Station, Council's approved. Planning is underway for that station in conjunction with Unilever to upgrade it to something that they think is world-class, straddling the Don River. We have the Gardner Hybrid coming down and landing in the bridge structure. So there's a piece of engineering work that we're doing currently with Metrolinx to determine that those envelopes and those design pieces that are necessary to take the bridge bundle together with the hybrid bundle, which will probably include flood protection north of the Keating Channel as a bundle, just out of the necessity of keeping one contractor on the job. So it's complicated, but we have detailed work underway internally, and we have extensive discussions both with Metrolinx, Unilever, and the TRCA and flood protection projects.
Okay. And can you remind me again on where the Broadview LRT stands on our priority list?
Broadview LRT is part of the planning that we've been doing throughout the last few years.
But we have a priority list of projects, so is this something that, for funding, right? Is this something that is coming up soon, or is this something that we should plan but still down the list?
Through the chair, in the context of our overall network planning in 2017, we are bringing forward a reprioritization from the 2013 prioritization that has taken place. At this point in time, the Broadview extension is not in the top 10.
Okay. When is that coming in 2017? Q2, Q3?
Q4.
Q4, okay.
Thank you. With committee's permission, I'd like to ask some further questions. So can you help me on the map that's here, and it's in relationship to the questions that my colleague brought up in regards to the ability for the film studios to expand because of the site that we're losing. Can you show me where in the Portland's precinct we'd be looking at then permitting further studio space? Because I think that's the question that was kind of asked. If you're taking one out, where are you looking at it coming back in? Do you have some map that you could show us and show us where the current, just point to highlight where the current studio spaces are and where you see the expansion of those spaces going in that land? And I know it's not part of the Unilever site, but can you do it on an overhead and just show it to us?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The film uses, as you're well aware, an industrial use, an employment use. They fit in our employment lands. And the site in question is in the south of Eastern Employment Area, which, if you look at the cursor on the map, extends further to the east of the Unilever Precinct. And it also extends east of Leslie Street off of the map. Those lands are all employment, and those are lands that would offer opportunities for film studio uses and film-related uses, assuming that the sites are large enough to accommodate a film studio. The other opportunities are in the Portlands, south of Lakeshore Avenue. As you're aware, we're bringing forward a planning framework for the Portlands. And we're hoping to be reporting on that in Q2 of this year. So there are portions of the Portlands that we're identifying in that planning framework, and which were identified in the land use direction previously at this committee, that are also appropriate for film uses. We've consulted with the film board on those as well. They're generally in areas that are in this area of the Portlands, in the McCleary district, as well as potentially in the South River area here, and along the north side of the ship channel. So the planning opportunities are there from a land use permission point of view. The question will be what resources need to be leveraged in order to support the film industry as they seek to expand and relocate film studio uses.
So if I understand, then you're coming back with a report on the Portlands areas and in Q2, and in that report, you'll be able to provide some further advice as to where you're looking for opportunities for the film studios to locate themselves?
That's correct. And I would also add to that that the existing lands in south of Eastern are also opportunities for film uses. Those will not be included in the Portlands planning framework.
Now, the report I'm going to read the motion on behalf of my colleague, Councillor Fletcher, is asking the Chief Planner and the General Manager of Economic Development and Culture to investigate opportunities. My understanding is they are working on that now? And that'll be a report coming back to where? Because that's the question. Everybody knows we're working, but I think people want to know, well, great, we're working. Where do you see it going in the future?
That will be addressed to the extent that those opportunities need to be addressed through land use permissions. They will be reported on through the Portlands planning framework here to PGM.
In Q2?
In Q2.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. I think Councillor Fletcher, as a visiting member and having a little interest in this, being in the community that you represent, I'm sure you want to speak on it. We're here to listen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will be putting some motions up that you have so kindly agreed to move, a number of them. Which I guess the clerk will put up. Thank you. The first one actually is follows up on what you said a second ago, Councillor Shiner, just in making sure that we're very actively looking for the replacement capacity for film. I'll come back to that. And looking at the coordination of the major enabling infrastructure projects, which is really what this whole project hinges on. I'd like to have, by the end of the year, at least some idea of where what the thinking is about where some of the city services would locate. And Mr. Livy said we could at least have a list of the ones that are existing there at Booth Yards on those 14 acres at council. And then there is the Enbridge Gas, which is one of the letters that's on here, which is, I don't know what you call it, their compressing station. All the gas comes in there and then goes back out through the city. So it's a very critical piece of infrastructure and needs to be thought about as to what that would look like in the precinct. So those are those four motions. Motion B just has to do with the consultation work plan that was in page 37 of the report. And the things that would be added on as would be the film industry, the local residents, local businesses, and local community groups. They seem to not have been highlighted in the way that I think my residents will want to feel that we're thinking about them in moving 50,000 jobs just down the street. And looking as well at the nature and types of new employment, that would be one of the things that would be studied. For this type of employment, what is it? The Broadview extension, what does that mean? It will mean a lot for people that are living on Broadview. And as well, looking at the remaining, it's not 2%. I don't want Mr. Jurovsky to have a heart attack here. It's 20, because it's the 80-20. It says 2%, Madam Clerk, and motion B, 1B. And that making sure that there's enough of a budget to communicate, as has been indicated by Councillor Shiner and Councillor Campbell, this is not just a local project. It's going to be of interest to many, many people. So to make sure that that is out there in trade magazines and everyone's able to follow it, it is important. And lastly, item C, or motion C, this is just a very standard provision that I don't think there's any motion that goes through Toronto and East York Community Council for planning that doesn't have this on it, which is 120 meters is not very big. So there's always a wider interest. So those are the motions that I would place here before you today, and thank the chair for moving them. And then just simply say that this is a really complicated, exciting, very challenging project that's being initiated here today. I think it's a big milestone for the city and for these employment lands, where we have an applicant coming forward and wanting to put thousands and thousands of jobs in our employment lands. You know, too often we have applicants come and they want to put thousands and thousands of residential units in our employment lands. So I have to say hats off to the First Gulf team for realizing that and looking forward that in the future we need room to grow, and this is a fantastic way to grow. And for being such an advocate for transit to the site to reach the Portlands as well, it will unlock an incredible amount of development, jobs, and it will be quite game-changing for the whole city, not just the south end of the city. So this is these very employment lands that we fought so hard to protect in 2008 and 2009, and the city went to the Ontario Municipal Board, where there was a 786,000 square foot retail mall planned for employment, and it was turned down at the OMB. And since then, we have also secured a film studio in the zoning in these employment lands, and we have really taken care to protect what is really the last employment lands anywhere near the core of our city. And I have to give my hat off to my community, which fought very hard for maintaining value-added jobs and understanding the importance of the next generation of jobs in the city. And the next generation of transit in the city will also be cited here. And the next generation of infrastructure projects will all take place in this very, very location.
And I get you to wrap up.
Yes, you can. I just want to say my last thing is two things. Neighborhood impact. While this is a city building project, there will be an impact on the neighborhood, and I think all of you who know me, I'm very careful with these projects and making sure that the entire neighborhood understands what is happening and figures it all out, so we're not having a big fight. And secondly, I'd also pay tribute to the Film Board and its role in flagging the importance of maintaining film in the area and working with city planning so well to identify locations where we can consolidate film uses for the future in the Portlands. So I really hope that this will be supported here today. I'm sure it will. And thank the planning staff for a fantastic job so far, and Mr. Jurovsky and his team for all the work that they've done to get us to this point.
Thank you. Bring it into committee. Are there speakers? Not seeing any. I'll make a few comments. Looking at the map, looking at what's being asked, Yeah, it's unlike any other presentation I've seen before. It's over 10 million square feet. It's actually 11 million square feet of employment office locations and 250,000 square feet almost of retail. It's a city within a city. It's a phenomenal undertaking that's in front of us and just a small piece of what the Portland's area really is and what it could become. And to see an application that isn't condo after condo after condo, which keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller in its size to try and make the numbers work, and see it as an employment area. You're talking a phenomenal size project. Over 10 million square feet of office. I mean, that's phenomenal. And yes, there's substantial costs to build it and substantial costs for the floodproofing along the Don River, which we've been looking at forever. But when you see the first project come in like this and the undertaking that Mr. Jarofsky and his crew have done and what they're putting into this, it's unlike anything else. The net return for the city as well can be quite substantial, because think of what that 1 million square meters of office space is going to return back in annual revenue to the city of employment lands and office spaces. You're talking in excess of $100 to $150 million a year in annual property taxes when it's brought out, when it's built out. And that's the type of development that you really want to see. And it provides a nucleus for the transit connections that are needed. It shows the support for it, and it shows the ability to provide jobs in the downtown, but just outside of the downtown, so everyone doesn't have to come to the core. So my hat's off to Mr. Jarofsky for going forward with his undertaking. I'm looking forward to our planning division and our economic division working diligently on this to try and bring it forward. I know everybody's totally engaged in this. They see it as a wonderful opportunity with a tremendous number of challenges that I think we're going to find a way to make sure that they're all dealt with. And I know that you have a local councillor that's completely involved, is tremendously supportive, wants to see the jobs come to the area and the development in that, and take out the old industrial site that was there and put in something new and vibrant like this. So we're expecting an awful lot from you, Mr. Jarofsky, not just the pictures and the buildings, but something that's really tremendous and as spectacular as that. I was around in the days when Mel Lastman talked about building a downtown core in North York, but he, and even what's built out there, unfortunately turned to condominiums, and we don't have the amount of employment there along the entire North York core that you're proposing over here. So I think it's phenomenal. I think it's a wonderful project. I think we're totally engaged. I think it's an opportunity for the city to look and work cooperatively with you and kick off this area, and I'll be thrilled to see the reports come back as we go forward as to how we are moving on this, how we're relocating and providing for our film industry in that area, how we're going to be providing the jobs, the transportation hubs, the entertainment hubs, and flood-proofing that area. So I'm more than happy to support this, and the motions that my colleague, Councillor Fletcher, asked to be put forward, I'm in complete support of, but more than happy to move them. You've all got them. So if we can, I think we vote on the motions first. The motions that I put forward from Councillor Fletcher, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I'll adopt the item then as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much for coming. It may be quiet in the room today, but it's definitely not quiet as to what you're doing. Thank you. Well, we have a couple of items left with us to deal with. One of them was the live streaming the Committee of Adjustment meetings, which was item number 4. And then we had a 10 o'clock item. I just held item number 4 because there was a question. Who's here for that from staff? There we are.
There are a few on this.
I see on both sides. So there's no non-members, that's easy. My questions then of you are, when do we, my understanding is that we expect to see this up and running and starting when?
Through you in July.
Okay, so there's one problem that we have, and I'm not sure how to restate it. And Mr. Livy, maybe you can, Mr. Livy? John? maybe you can help us with this problem.
What's the problem?
There's a question as to who's going to be responsible for the detailed work to be able to put up the data. This is on the live streaming of the Committee of Adjustment meetings. So currently, the clerk staff, if I'm correct, deal with it on the council meetings. Am I right?
I believe that's true.
But there's no one designated to be able to do the same work to make I'll help over this. So there's no one as yet designated to do that work on the Committee of Adjustments. Am I correct, John?
Mr. Chair, I can't speak for the City Planning Division, but there is a fairly low overhead associated with maintaining this. So our office is more than willing to work with other divisions to transfer that knowledge and to put some routines in place. So,
Okay, because that's what I wanted to know. My understanding was, hadn't decided yet who would take that data and those, the recordings and allow them to be accessed and find the issues that people might do. And can your division do it without having to add any staff to it?
well, Mr. Chair, I think between the divisions involved, it can probably, something can be worked out. I mean, we've been doing it now for almost 2 years. We do about 300 meetings a year, and it's I can say it has been a marginal influence on our business. It's not like we have full-time TV producers working for us. It is a fairly marginal activity. So we're happy to assist either planning or whoever else might be involved, or even examine doing it as a favor to colleagues. So I'm sure we can work something out.
So when we get this up and running by the summertime, that'll be worked out, and if it's not, you'll let us know?
Correct.
Okay, because I understand that was one of the issues as to how do you turn it. If you're going to make it happen, then I don't want to know anything else, but it's going to happen. And if you have a problem with it, you'll let us know. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
So we've been doing this since, at City Hall, North York, since May the 1st, and Scarborough since June. We've been taping these Committee of Adjustment hearings, that's correct?
That's correct.
And it says that the recordings are stored and available to council members and members of the public. How frequently are members of the public making a request, or even council members? Are we keeping track? We must be keeping track.
I'll have to get back to you with an answer on that one. I don't have that information.
Can you give me a ballpark idea? Are you run off your feet with requests, or are you hardly ever seeing requests?
Again, I can't answer that one.
Okay. We'll wait for an answer at a later date then.
Okay.
Okay, so there's no further questions of staff. This is a report here for information, am I correct?
To adopt the recommendation to
And
receive.
adopt a recommendation to receive, which I will move briefly on it. I appreciate the staff doing the work that they have now to do the recordings, and also the second phase of it now to be able to put it where we can find the information. I do know that my office, who has interest in a number of Committee of Adjustment hearings, hasn't gone after staff to get the DVDs because it's difficult then to find it, to go through the DVD, to find that application, to see what's there. The intention now is that the information will be stored electronically, so you can go online, you can be able to look at a particular application about that site, and then be able to say there was a hearing at 100 Queen Street, I'd like to see what transpired in it. The other reason it's helpful now is applicants are also offered mediation, and they don't take it yet, or they haven't yet, but it's available, and we're going to the local appeals body. So for us to be able to see on some of the applications that are of concern to us, what's transpired at the committee, how the members acted in relationship to the requests that were there, and the public acted, if we have one that we might find concern with, will be very helpful. But now we're back into the old ages of trying to find data. It's simply a disk that you can have and start to scroll through it. Yet on the council meetings, there is a process in place where you can find that item and look it up much easier. So the fact that we're moving forward with it is great. The cost of it, I understand, is minimal. Clerk's department offering to assist in making that data available is really very much appreciated, and that's why I'm Moving the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the other item that we had is item number 7. Number 5. I have to do 5 first, then I go to 7. I'm doing what I'm told. So item number 5, we have some speakers on that. That's technical amendments to bylaw 569-2013. And I have a Thomas Woodhull from BA Consulting. I'm looking at the crowd out there. You must be Thomas. Well, you have 5 minutes to speak to us. Please we'll hear from you, and then if there's questions, we'll ask them, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm almost glad that the gallery shrunk because I'm an engineer talking about technical amendments to parking spaces. So it's for everyone's benefit that no one else falls asleep. I'm a professional engineer in the province of Ontario. I work with a company that does engineering and transportation planning here in Toronto. We do a lot of work focused around parking spaces, parking design, and what's been proposed by staff has been a harmonization of the city's requirements in the bylaw for barrier-free parking with the requirements set out by the province under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We're greatly in support of the harmonization that's being proposed. We've had issues brought before council in the past by Committee of Adjustment in the past, dealing with reconciling the differences between the provincial and municipal legislation. So this is well received. However, one of the goals has been to harmonize the length and width requirements of these parking spaces, and what's been proposed is actually layering an additional level of demand upon the provincial legislation. And what I think this is going to result in is a high number of variances or site-specific bylaws put forward to the city incidental to the harmonization. On 2 specific fronts, and I've submitted some materials, there's width changes. So the provincial legislation allows required parking to be split into 2 types. Wider type A spaces, which are for people who need to side load out of a wheelchair, for example, and type B spaces, which are narrower, but are for people who don't have a mobility device, but still require proximity to an access. So this would be someone who can't walk very far and uses a cane, for example. The province allows you to split the required amount of parking 50-50 between A and B. What's been put forward by city staff is that only type A, the wider spaces, are being proposed. While this might seem like a good idea, we're not aware of any technical studies that support the need for the additional wider spaces versus the smaller ones. And the impact is that the wider spaces cannot be easily fit into what would be considered a conventional structural grid. So something like a parking structure above or below grade can very easily replace 3 standard parking stalls with 2 AODA compliant stalls. If we look at providing 2 of the proposed stalls, they actually exceed the width that is normally permitted between 2 columns. This is going to mean one of 2 things. Developers will have to come up with structural solutions to do this, or they'll be seeking variances at the city to reduce the width to be compliant with the province. This also presents complications where provincial infrastructure, like a courthouse or a university building, is installed in the city of Toronto, and we're forced to comply with the AODA regulations as well as the city's requirements. Of greater concern to me is the length requirement that's being imposed as part of the proposition. The AODA parking spaces in the provincial legislation do not mention length. They're designed to be width compliant, but the length is left up to the municipalities. In the City of Toronto, the length of a parking stall is 5.6 meters, and as councillors are well aware, harmonizing that has been a large issue in the city since amalgamation. What the proposed requirement puts forward is a length of 5.9 meters, an additional foot of length. What this means is that the parking space for an accessible user will actually protrude into the drive aisle. What this means is then the drive aisle has to shift, and that has impacts on the parking spaces opposite, and so on down the line. What will happen is that as a driver drives along a drive aisle, they'll actually see the parking aisle jog. This presents structural implications. And while I believe the intent was to provide more space for rear-loading vehicles, those who would have a van with a ramp that deploys out the back, the width that's being provided, the 1 foot, is insufficient to fully remove the loading and unloading procedure out of the drive aisle. In any case, whether the space is 5.6 meters or 5.9 meters, that activity is going to occur in the drive aisle. So while I believe the intentions may have been good, I do believe that this will have a very negative impact on designs being put forward presently and designs in the future, and will likely result in a high number of variances or site-specific bylaws coming forward for development applications to resolve this in a way that is compliant with the provincial legislation. So thank you for your time. I would strongly encourage the committee to look at, rather than layering on these additional requirements, to simply harmonizing with the provincial legislation as written and keeping things nice and simple for both the city and for applicants such as architects and developers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there questions of the deputant from non-members of the committee? Not seeing any. From members of the committee, Councillor Perks.
I want to make sure I understood something you said. You said that the provincial regulation says that for the length of the space, there's no number to harmonize to?
Correct.
And at the same time, you're telling us to simply harmonize to the provincial number?
So what I would advise is that the city should harmonize to its existing parking space, which is what the provincial legislation envisions. So in Toronto, 5.6.
Sorry, I want to make sure.
Yep.
So the provincial regulation doesn't envision status quo. It envisions changes to make sure that accessibility is universal.
It's agnostic to the length of the space.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Other questions of the deputant? So I know there's a number of letters here, which others. Is the concern in new builds or in buildings that have been approved and might have to be adjusted?
I know that some colleagues at Build were looking for grandparenting of current applications to ensure that things before the city didn't have to go back and redesign if this change was promoted. What I'm specifically looking to bring forward is that the dimensional requirements that are being proposed be relaxed to the point where they conform with the province's requirements and are not layering on additional things. It would be for new builds, it would be for applications as it's written currently before the city as well.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? Thank you very much. Are there any questions of staff by non-members of committee? Not seeing any. Members of committee. Councillor Burks.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's the staff person. I should be, there we go. Hello. So the report that we have in front of us says that the goal here is to harmonize with provincial regulation. Is that what the amendment to the bylaw actually achieves?
The provincial regulations are a little bit confusing in terms of the way they're written. And
that's not news.
Yeah. So we've tried to draw this in a manner that is more consistent for the public to understand and also applies the numbers in a more logical progression. For instance, the provincial rate for parking spaces starts at 1 to 12, you need 1, and then for up to 100, you need 4. When you go above 100 to 200, it's 33%, and then above 200, it's 1 for every 50. So we've basically done some adjustments to reflect that. So for instance, when you hit 100, we provide 5 spaces plus 2 for the next 100, 1 for every 50, but it continues on forever because that's what the provincial plan says. Much easier to understand. The requirement for a type A and a type B space, the current standard that we have in the bylaw that was done under the original AODA legislation was for the smaller space plus room for a 1.5 meter accessible aisle for that space alone. So it's actually 3.9, and the largest space here is 3.4 now. So what we've done is we've tried to standardize. We don't know how many people will have to have a larger vehicle that has a side dismount as opposed to people who can step out of their car basically on their own. So we said it was much more practical and logical for everyone just to have one space size, and anyone could park in any space. Every handicap space would look the same. So you wouldn't have to worry about, does my vehicle go in there? Do I fit next to the accessible aisle? Those things didn't make sense. The other issue, as the gentleman indicated, the provincial regs allow for every municipality to use whatever parking length it has. So if you had a 5.6, as the city does, that could be your parking length. If you had 5.9 in Burlington or somewhere else, everything would match that 5.9 if you chose to do so. But we recognized when we were going through there that we only have two options. One is we can force them to put some of the parking spaces into a parallel parking space, which we require to be much longer, which would allow for the rear ramp exit. Or we could try and accommodate through a slightly larger parking space length, the ability to take that ramp out and not project, if you're in the basement, not project this far into an aisle if that's where it is. Or if you're on surface, you could actually put the ramp from the vehicle onto an accessible barrier-free path. So we felt those two achieved a better scenario for us. We didn't push the ramp too far into the accessible path by having that little extra space. That was the logic that we pursued at that point, wishing to see how that would play itself out in the long run. But you know, from the city's perspective of being open and fair and equitable, we felt this was probably a more appropriate approach.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Councillor Ballo?
So this is not going to be retroactive. We're not, I mean, we're not going to go back to buildings that have been built and force them to change their parking spots? Is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The bylaw is not retroactive. It's on a go-forward basis, but be aware that the provincial legislation that implements this has been in place since January of 2015.
Okay. And the deputant also talked about the practical issue of right now they can turn 3 spaces, regular spaces between columns into the 2, and that with these new measurements that cannot be easily achieved. Can you comment on that?
There are many examples where you could achieve it. Every building can be designed to certain standards, and we're not suggesting that these accessible spaces have to replace an existing space. There are other locations in a parking garage, along walls, things like that, where they could be located and still function.
Okay.
No further questions? Speakers? Councillor Perks is moving the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for coming. Councillor Ballo, you had held one item, which is the item 18.7, the city planning time tracking system. Do you have questions of staff? Are there any questions of non-members? Councillor Fletcher, you have? Or
Yes, I've always been interested in what the tracking system is that's used, city planning.
Through the chair, the report that you have before you right now is an outcome of a motion recommending that we implement a tracking system for development review. We right now manage projects using a project management model that is driven by deadlines and timelines, but we don't have a tracking system per se. The request of committee is that we put a tracking system in place. We have undertaken a preliminary reconnaissance since the recommendation was brought forward in January 11th, 2017, with our colleagues in other jurisdictions across Ontario. We were hoping to find a technology or a software that was used elsewhere that we could simply employ. We have found that there's no jurisdiction that actually has a technology for development review other than a system like our IBMS system, which is less about tracking and more about documenting. So we are going to be moving forward and identifying and working with providers to see whether a system can be created, whether there's a time sheeting system, a pre-existing one that we can use. We've looked at the system that's used by engineering services. It doesn't have the level of granularity that we would in fact need for our system to be effective. One of the challenges that we have, of course, as you're fully aware, is that the development review process is highly nuanced and fluid and involves multiple changes throughout the process. We might have a community consultation meeting and decide that we want an additional community consultation meeting, or decide we want to put together a working group, or decide that additional reports are required. The comparison I used earlier, which I think is still a good one, is a bit like cooking dinner. You can't actually say, this is how you do it. Every night it depends on your ingredients, it depends on what recipe that you're making, and every application is very different. So it's hard to find a standardized program that you could apply to development review. We do measure our outcomes, which is different. We measure our timelines. We have a series of KPIs in order to ensure that we are that we have good customer service and an expedited process.
What do other city divisions use to track? I mean, some of them, like the library and others, have massive amounts of documents that they're dealing with. They need to know where things are over many locations.
Through the chair, the two I can speak to specifically, in legal services, they track time. So that's simply every time you undertake a task, you put in how much time it took. So time tracking is relatively straightforward to do, and there's a multitude of different programs that exist in order to do that. In Heritage Preservation Services, when we went to electronic service in 2013, we implemented a tracking service that is part of the e-service delivery. So when an application is received and it goes into the system, the clock starts ticking. 6 days after it's received, a reminder comes up to the staff person indicating that the permit is due within another 5 days. I'm not sure I've got the right number of days, but so that is part of the e-service program that was created in Heritage Preservation Services. My understanding is that that program is very similar to a program that's used in Toronto buildings. It's much easier to implement that kind of a system when you have a very standardized process, and pulling a permit is very standardized as opposed to development review on complex applications. So we're looking at a breadth of possibilities.
I did ask if you looked at what the library does, who moves massive amounts.
No, we have not looked at what the library does, and I'm not sure that it would be relevant, because what we're doing is project management, which is there are a whole series of different softwares that do pertain specifically to project management.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Barlow?
Just one more following up on that is timing. What you foresee coming back? I mean, what's your timelines? I know there's quite a bit of research that sounds like you are undertaking, but what's the timeline?
Through the chair, we're going to be coming back in April, and we're hoping by April to have some clarity as to how we're planning to proceed, and also what some of the costs are associated with how we're going to proceed.
No other questions? Recommendation is to adopt the staff recommendation to receive, which I will move. I look forward to our staff coming back with some advice as to how we can get a time tracking system in place that's reasonable, as we're just trying to be able to follow up on how development applications are processing through the multitude of divisions that they have to go through in here, and the difficulty that some face in getting approved. So we'll have that information. And I appreciate the work the staff is doing so far. And you have a headache? No, I thought you had a headache.
Chair,
Councillor Barlow,
I'm new to the committee, so forgive me. Just one more quick question. I'm just wondering if you're taking this in consideration, because I find some of the applications that come through, and we usually say that they're costs recovered, these are cost recovered work, but some of them are a lot more work than what they pay for. So are we going to try to get a system that actually is going to enable us to do that? And so if we see that, certain developers and application that, our staff has to be, holding their hand all the way through, that then we can say, go back and say, you know what, this is far beyond what your fees have actually paid for. Are you thinking that way?
Through the chair, two answers to that. The first is the inverse is also true.
Absolutely.
We have applications where, we have several applications in 2016 for, 60-story or 30-story office buildings that we in fact were able to approve in under 9 months, because we had a very sophisticated applicant who brought great materials to us, the buildings that were in conformity with our tall building guidelines, and we were able to expedite the process. So it does go both ways. We brought to committee in December of 2016 a detailed analysis of the fees that had been undertaken by Watsons and Associates, a third-party consulting firm that reviews fees for municipalities across the GTA, whereby they did a deep dive on our files and assessed the mismatch, quite frankly, between the level of effort and what we were charging. And as a result, we brought forward a recommendation to this committee for a fee increase of 34%. That was passed by this committee, passed by City Council, and implemented as of January 1st, 2017. We are required, as per the user fee policy, to review the fee every 4 years in order to bring it into alignment. So I'm quite confident, based on the review that we just undertook, that we're in a very good position right now. A 34% increase is not insignificant. On large projects, it's actually quite a significant value.
But having a tracking system that would help us identify and flag those applications, I think would be helpful, no?
Through the chair, yes, it absolutely would. One of the tensions that we have, of course, in development review is that the reasons for an extended timeline often vary. Sometimes it's because a technical report is outstanding. Sometimes it's because of coordination internally amongst the 16 different divisions involved in development review. Sometimes it's because the developer is actually slowing down the application because the market is slowing down. So there are a whole variety of variables that are quite challenging to account for. But it will actually make the review process that we undertake every 4 years much simpler, because currently what we do is we do a series of case studies and we do a deep dive where we measure the time, not on all applications, because of complex OPAs, there's over 500, but we do a deep dive on a series of applications. Theoretically, we'll see when we have the system in place, we'll have that information at our fingertips, and we'll be able to pull it on a specific file. That's our hope.
Thank you. Councillor Perk, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, I just did. I always get a little bit nervous when I see these efforts to try to get technology to somehow tell us how we're doing our work. It's never as simple as that, and I appreciate the Chief Planner's comments. And I just wanted to caution, while there is some value on getting some high-level information, there is a rabbit hole you can go down if you expect too much of a system like this. Look at the provincial e-health system. Exactly. It's exactly what went wrong, is that people had far too large an expectation of what computers and devices can do to track how work works in a real human context, particularly when you have multiple parties who are responsible for different parts. You have community party, applicant, and the planners. Accounting for who's responsible for what is a judgment call. I mean, even within the City of Toronto, our own FPARS program went many tens of millions of dollars over, and while it's provided some useful information, the usefulness of it is actually more tied to whether or not a given division produces like-for-like widget type work, or whether it produces something that involves a lot more judgment. So, and just for, to cheer my colleague, Councillor Fletcher, up, I'd encourage anyone who wants to think theoretically about this to go look at Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man, which get right on that. There you go. It's in your local library, and I'm sure you can get it online as well. I just want to caution, don't have too high an expectation of what a tool like this can actually achieve.
I had already moved the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The last item we have was the added item that I put on for new business. It's a report request to give in some information and updates on our Heritage Division. I'll move it forward. Are there any questions? Are there any speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. No other items. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for coming.